Hi, my name is Bill Loden, and today I'm going to talk about moving existing applications to Windows Azure.
Is that like forced busing?
Okay, let's not get political. By now, you should be familiar with the benefits of cloud computing and how Windows Azure provides these benefits at a potential cost savings when compared to traditional on-premises computing.
If not, you can watch one of his other videos and I'll punch out early.
Maybe you've even had a chance to try out the Windows Azure TCO and ROI calculator to get a good idea of the potential savings that you'll be able to enjoy.
Yeah, he did one of those too.
Perhaps you're ready to move an existing application into the cloud, but you're wondering, is it difficult and how do I get started?
Or how can I trick someone into doing it for me?
The good news is that migrating an existing application to Windows Azure should not be too difficult, as long as you plan it correctly.
And there you have it. Good night, folks.
First, let me say that there's no magic bullet when it comes to migration. Each application is unique and will present its own unique challenges.
I don't know about Magic Bullet, but I went to school with a guy we called Magic Mullet.
Think about how your application fits with the following scenarios. And before you actually get started with the migration, make sure you have a strategy in place.
Just like you would before invading a foreign country.
What did I just say about politics? To begin with, what type of application are you going to be moving? Windows Azure is designed to be flexible in that it can host websites, services, and even background processing applications with little or no user interface.
No face?
No interface.
Oh, sorry, I wasn't actually paying attention.
Let's assume that we have a public-facing website that we want to move into the cloud. The next question might be, what framework does your application use? It could be ASP.NET, Ruby on Rails, or perhaps PHP. Let's assume, at least for now, that you've got an existing ASP.NET application that you want to move to Windows Azure. You can create a new cloud service using Visual Studio and then simply reference an existing ASP.NET web application. And just about all the work is already done for you.
Oh no, you are not getting off that easy. What if you, okay, I wasn't paying attention again.
You might need to do a little extra configuration if your application requires full trust. But for the most part, an existing ASP.NET web application should be able to run as is.
Even without paying attention, that sounds easy.
Well, that's not to say that there aren't some gotchas. Mostly, these have to do with storage and state. The big thing to remember is that Windows Azure is all about commodity resources.
Commodities? Like pork bellies?
Commodity resources. Your application runs in one or more virtualized operating systems, and Windows Azure makes no guarantees that the same web client will communicate with the same virtual server across multiple requests. This is absolutely essential in order for Windows Azure to provide its high degree of reliability and scalability, yet it may cause your application to break.
Break? You mean like moonwalk and spin on its head?
If your application relies on local resources such as the file system or an in-memory session, or otherwise relies on resources local to the web server, it may not work correctly when you move it to Windows Azure. But if that's the case, your application would probably not scale out correctly regardless of what hosting environment it lives in.
So you have no one to blame but yourself.
The bottom line is that you might need to modify application components that use the local file system. You might need to swap in-memory session state for database session state, or you might have to replace a local database with either SQL Azure or Windows Azure Storage. Often, you'll find sample code or even a reusable API for what you need to do.
What about if your application is not an ASP.NET web application? Did I say that right?
It might be a Java app that relies on Java server pages or servlets, or maybe it's a PHP or Ruby on Rails web application. The most effective migration strategy is to start by getting your application running on Windows Server 2008.
I've actually got a couple of copies of that if you're interested.
That way, you can isolate and fix any migration issues that are unrelated to Windows Azure first, and then move the application into the cloud. In many cases, you'll find that migration is still relatively straightforward, even for non.NET applications.
But why would anyone want a non.NET application? Psst.
You'll find that Microsoft provides guidance for common scenarios. For instance, you can download a Windows Azure MySQL PHP Solution Accelerator. Speaking of MySQL, it is likely that your application uses a relational database for long-term storage of application data. When you migrate your application to Windows Azure Storage, there's no single solution here, but rather a number of choices that you have.
It's like a nerd buffet.
Now, the easiest path is from a SQL Server database to a SQL Azure database. You can use the same ADO.NET or ODBC connectivity and the same T-SQL commands, except that you get a relational database in the clouds with automatic replication and failover.
Why do you always look at me whenever the word fail comes up?
Depending on your scenario, you may also consider Windows Azure Storage, which is not a relational database, but rather a place where you can easily store binary data, semi-structured data, and message queues. These are called queues, tables, and blobs.
And with that, Microsoft officially ran out of names.
Windows Azure is designed to provide a solution for just about every scenario. So if you have an application that you'd like to move into the cloud, it's likely that Windows Azure has a solution for you.
As long as you don't mind getting blobs all over it.